All right,
All
I
right.
believe we should be streaming and recording.
Okay, I call to order this July 28th, 2022 meeting of the Moab City Planning Commission at 6:03 p.m. First item of business, we have citizens to be heard. So that is for any item that is not on the agenda this evening. And it sounds like we do have some people there in chambers who don't have a pending agenda item. So we'll wait if you're there. I thought I heard maybe Courtney and Kyle wait till your item to speak if you need to.
Joe, would you like just participate? Okay, so we have no citizens to be heard, but Kyle Kaiser and Joe Downard in the audience tonight.
Okay, great. And we did not receive any written email submitted comments as far as I'm aware, just putting that out there for the record. If you did email something, we did not get it. Please try again. Okay, next item is item 3, approval of minutes 3.1. We have minutes from our June 9th meeting. I will hear a motion to approve those if you've taken a look from commissioners.
Yeah, Ruben, your sound's off from my end as well. Can everyone else hear Ruben?
No, I saw him speak. Yeah, check your the up arrow by your mute button and make sure that your microphone is the one that you want, especially because you have headphones on. That always gets squirrely with me. In that case, I will make a motion to approve the minutes from June 9th, 2022. Is there a second? You can just raise your hand if you want.
I'll second it.
Okay, Jill, second. We will do a roll call vote that I will call whenever you're ready, Corey.
All right, you can go ahead and call it out. Thank you.
Okay, Jill.
Aye.
Jessica.
Aye.
Ruben. Got a thumbs up from Ruben. That's an aye. And I vote aye as well. Motion passes 4-0. Okay, our first action item of the evening in section 4, action item 4.1, proposed planning resolution 06/2022, a resolution amending the City of Moab Planning Commission bylaws to reduce the number of planning commissioners from 7 to 5 members. Update resolution number for Article 1, Section 1.1D, general provisions regarding adopted rules of procedure for planning commission meetings. Amend language to require the majority of the planning commission body for voting approval and adjust minor formatting issues.
If we would like, we can go over this particular planning resolution. It's very minute. It's just a single, number change in this case. So if you haven't reviewed that and we'd like to share that and share screen, we can do that with the red line, or we can go ahead and make a motion because of the simplicity of that. But we might do a quick review if we need to. I guess any questions on this item from the Planning Commission?
Seeing no's all around.
Okay. And so I think I am going to share a screen just for total transparency because we are restructuring. I'll just make sure that the public is fully aware of what we're doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Corey, while you're pulling that up, I'll just give a little background as the chair. We've definitely had issues, particularly in the current and sort of post-pandemic world, having a quorum for meetings, particularly when we're doing both digital and in person or a mix of them. With a 7-member commission, we need to have 5 commissioners present in order to have a quorum, which is a surprisingly high bar with people's busy lives. And we do want to be able to maintain commissioners from sort of different segments of the community who have other things going on. So when we had a member recently move away and had a member resign, we had 2 openings. And so it seemed like a good time to reevaluate going back to 5 members, which is actually how it was before Mayor Niehaus decided to encourage last council to expand it to 7. there's my spiel. Corey, take it away.
Perfect. On a more technical note, as you can see in the red line, all we're doing is, again, updating what was the original resolution component in our bylaws, whereas the city council already approved the ordinance in which we're updating the municipal code portion of this. So this is just the planning commission run bylaws. So it does not need to go before a public hearing or before city council. It's just we're responding to that ordinance that was approved. And then this item changing 7 to 5. Very simple. That's the only context. So this plan resolution 06, that's that particular item. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for letting us expand a little bit on that.
Cool. So that makes sense. This wouldn't have any effect on anyone's terms or anything like that. Your terms still run to when they run to based on when you were appointed to the commission. But now we'll just be 5 with a 3-member quorum required, which I think will be really helpful and help with some of the stalls that we've had because we haven't had commissioners who've been able to attend. So there is a proposed resolution in the agenda summary, a recommended motion, excuse me, if anyone wants to make that, now is the time.
I'll make the motion.
Okay.
I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission approve planning resolution number 06/2022, a resolution amending the City of Moab Planning Commission bylaws to reduce the number of planning commissioners from 7 to 5 members, update resolution number for Article 1, Section 1.1D, general provisions regarding adopted rules of procedures for planning commission meetings, amend language to require the majority of the planning commission body for voting approval and adjust minor formatting issues.
Nicely done.
I'll second.
Okay. Have a motion by Jill and a second by Jessica. Any discussion before we take a vote? It looks like Ruben maybe has his sound working now.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Well
Perfect.
done. It's those headphones every time, man. I tell you, every time I have an issue.
I set up a new computer and just drivers aren't working. So
Oh no.
I switched to like 3 different mics and nothing was working.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. We'll do a roll call motion if we don't have any discussion. Excuse me, a roll call vote. Jessica,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Ruben.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. So that motion passes unanimously. Next item, 4.2. Also in the same vein, it seems, proposed planning resolution 07/2022, a resolution replacing the Moab Planning Commission resolution number 2018-01, a resolution adopting rules of procedure for planning commission meetings to remove language referring to closed session procedure and amend language to require the majority of the planning commission body for voting approval. Corey, it would be nice to have a little spiel on this one.
Or quickly, who was the second on that previous motion?
That was Jessica.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
He said Jessica, so that may have confused.
Let me share screen again. This again, is within the same context as we are restructuring our bylaws. We also, so the changes required an amendment to the municipal code, which was accomplished through the ordinance passed by city council. The planning resolution we just passed is changing the bylaws for the planning commission by the planning commission's hand. And then this is changing the rules and procedures for 2 items. One was something that as we decrease the body, we wanted to ensure that the voting majority was accurate to the body, not to the quorum of commissioners present. So if we were to say have a 3-person quorum, it would mean that only 2 people would need to vote in favor of something for it to be passed of a 5-member body, which is not what we wanted. And that's what the previous language would have allowed. So what we've now done is made the majority vote required to be a majority of the full body, regardless of how many are present or not from the quorum. So won't be functionally any different other than just ensuring that we have majority votes. So 3 members will have to vote aye for any particular item to pass, regardless if there are 3, 4, or 5 members present. And then the other change was, I think, not in, yeah, it wasn't in this particular. Is it in there? Is it the line strike through that I'm just missing? Okay, just below that. So this was intended to, well, I think the rules and procedures were brought over from City Council. I think originally that was the structure. But the Planning Commission doesn't have the authority or discretion to go into a closed session. There aren't any items on which this body would ever be circumstanced to the legal mechanisms to allow this. So it's just, it was superfluous language that needed to be taken out, and that's why we're striking it from the rules and procedures. So again, a very simple change, just housekeeping as we're getting into the actual language.
Great, thank you, Corey. Anyone have any questions for Corey?
I'm having a little bit of trouble finding it in one of the exhibits, but there was a bit about calling to order, and it was about needing, and I don't know if it was changed with this set or if it was something that we had prior, but it was a requirement to have quorum to call something to order and to even talk about it at all. Does that sound right or familiar?
I mean, that's the requirement that I operate under, and
Okay.
have been. That's my understanding. I may not be able to point to it exactly in the bylaws, but that's in there for sure.
I was just wondering if that was necessary, just as far as having a conversation going. It feels kind of moot now that we're going to a smaller commission, at least just previously when we had 7 people. Just
So
if we had 3 people in.
Yeah, what we've done in the past is say we're expecting a quorum so we don't cancel the meeting, but then someone doesn't show up or we get a last minute cancellation and we don't have it. We won't call the meeting to order, which means that nothing that we do has any sort of force of weight of votes. But we can say, Corey can certainly give us a summary of things upcoming. We can have general discussion. We just can't talk about or vote on things that would have been on the agenda, which we've definitely done that in the past. Like, oh, Corey had an update for us on this proposed ordinance. Do you want to go ahead and give the update, Corey, like not in any sort of official capacity.
Okay. That makes sense. I guess I was just wondering about the technicalities of that. And
Yeah,
I know we'd run by that before.
totally.
I guess if we're going shorter, then it doesn't really need to be addressed. But just a
That's
bit
my
of,
hope.
Right.
Keep coming to meetings, everybody.
Yeah. Because I'm just imagining when 2 people show up and, most of the information has to be repeated anyways, but
Yeah.
in those cases, meetings just don't happen.
Yep.
Cool. I don't have anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Ruben. Good clarification. Okay, same as the last one, there is a proposed motion in the agenda summary, if anyone would like to make it on this agenda item. I see.
This one might have been, was this in the summary? Was it correct, or was it a copy of the previous recommended motion?
Oh, you know what? It's it actually links to the. Oh no, it doesn't. Here.
It's, yeah, the motion, recommended motion structure. Oh, it does have 06 in there. What I would recommend from a staff level is that as you make a motion, you make it on the correct resolution number, but because these are mirrored approvals, one is just rules and procedures, which were discussed in both items. The rest of the motion would be accurate, just ensure that we have the correct resolution number, which is Planning Resolution 07.
I will take a crack at that. I move to approve Planning Resolution number 07-2022, a resolution replacing the Moab Planning Commission Resolution number 2018-01, a resolution adopting rules of procedure for Planning Commission meetings to remove language referring to closed session procedure and amend language to require the majority of the Planning Commission body for voting approval.
Look at that.
Okay, I have a recommended motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, we'll do a roll call vote, same as last time. Jill?
Aye.
Chesso?
Aye.
Ruben?
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Motion passes unanimously.
Perfect. Well, thank you all so much for those items. And now officially, as we move into the rest of the meeting, a vote of 3 is now a passing, officially an affirmative approval vote. So I'll kick it back to you, Kaya, as we move through the agenda.
Great. I'm also realizing I said we needed to have 5 for a quorum, which was not true. Under 7, it was 4, but that is my mistake. Okay, next item, 4.3, proposed planning resolution 08-2022, a resolution approving the level 2 site plan application for the 2x3 townhome and condominium project on property located at 175 South 300 East, Moab, Utah 84532. This is a briefing and a possible action. Corey?
Thank you. We do have a presentation for this item. We also have the property owner and shared applicant through the owner, Kyle Kaiser, in the audience. So if we do have any questions from the commission, I'm sure Kyle would be willing to address those. She's not, so it'll just be you. But we'll work through the presentation quickly and then get to questions if there are any remaining. Is everyone able to see that all right? Okay. My computer is doing funny things now. Let's see if I can go. That's just bizarre. Let me try something. Oh dear. Thanks everyone for being patient. There we go. Alrighty. Again, the project title that we're looking at tonight is the 2x3 townhomes and condominiums site plan. Understanding that that can be a little bit confusing. This is not a townhome plat or condominium plat approval. It is the multi-household development site plan approval for this. So we will be seeing the plats come through for their individual approvals, both in the townhome set and the condominium set. But that'll be at a later date following this approval. Parcel size is just under an acre in the R3 multi-household residential zone. The project is designed as a multi-household development of an 8-unit townhome and 13-unit condominium space, starting as that multi-household development size. Within the vicinity map, we're just south of the Center Street ball fields by a block, adjacent to the Apache Motel, which you'll see on the east side of the property there. This was an excerpt from the architectural plan set, which was using a civil drawing plan set, identifying over on this arm of the property is the 13-unit condominium site, and then the row house of townhomes, a 8-unit townhome project there. The circulation path that we're seeing within the project is a private road. So all private on-site development is going to be private infrastructure and privately run through the development. So this is not going to be a public road, which is why they were able to design the location of these units in this way. focusing on the row house townhome set. This is the elevation west facing and east facing. So garage sets are to the interior of the lot, and what would be the rear yard is facing the street. So we're actually mirroring the property set, similar to what we've seen with I'm not sure if there's a name for them, Ben Bird's townhome development just south of the ball fields. So that orientation will be similar to that, where access is happening interior of the lot there. And then this is the overview of the condominium site, similar section where parking is accessed from the north. And then along, you'll see this pathway that has been placed on kind of the south wing of this little branch. So the Apache Motel being on this side of the property, and then that circulation path. So this is a designated open space area designed for community use, or at least the tenant and property owner use of this area. For the Axon renderings provided by Architectural Squared to give a little bit better understanding. A unique aspect to this property that we haven't seen before is a 3-story development in our multi-household residential zone. This is something that we haven't previously seen before, mostly because the ability to maintain a 3-story structure under that 30-foot building height, because of the joist plate heights for the floors and or roof as you move up in those tiers, takes up space where your actual living space becomes sub 8 foot potentially in most cases. With this particular site, you're gonna notice, if you pay attention to the detail here, that the units are actually garden level recessed into the landscape a little bit. The way that the slope of the property goes really from, and Kyle, you can check me on this, the southeast side kind of to the northwest is a slight slope that way. It allowed for, as we're looking at from the street side, this unit to be recessed into the landscape a little bit, allowing for that building height. So while they are compliant by the average, I'm sorry, I'm not articulating this, the average finished grade is the measurement point from which we'll measure the main body of the structure, puts this sub 30 feet, but even at its tallest point is only 2 inches over 30 feet. So it's 30 foot, 2 inches, even without the average accommodation that we're seeing because of the recess structure. So while it is 3 stories, we're about as tight as we can be. And that's something we worked with Courtney on to ensure that that was something that was repeatable. And we were very comfortable with that moving forward with our engineers. And then this is so this first set was the condominium set, excuse me. And then this was the townhome set for Axon. So similar situation there, where they're being recessed at particular points on the structure, allowing them to have that 3 stories. The background, pretty generic as it was running through DRT, but wanted to share to ensure it was on public display for the process of this. Kyle has been in a number of times, and I think we've been moving through it okay, trying to get this final set complete. And then within the narrative, describing both the condominium and then the townhome construction site of square footage areas that we're looking at.
Quick question. Courtney's
Sure.
trying to log in and she
Oh.
says she can watch, but she can't talk.
Yeah, because it's not a
Virtual meeting.
it's just an electronic for the council member. She was, if she were here, she'd be available, but we're not doing consulting connections, if that makes sense. But if we need to, I think we're a small enough agenda, kind of small enough body. If there's any significant questions from the commission, we can get Courtney online and get her that link, kind of make a special coordination.
Okay. All right.
the one, and my presentation is nearly done. With the recommendation, this was one minor change I had made, was under the conditions of approval, that subsection A, to read that the project need a condominium and townhome plat application approval. The way it was described is that the project would need a condominium plat, I believe is the way it read. And Courtney Kaiser has pointed out that in the plan sets, those plats were actually included in that set. So they've already in advance developed the townhome and condominium plats prepared. We just don't have the applications ready or the HOA and CCNRs ready, which is why we're separating these approvals out. That was just a minor clarification. So if we do move for this item, I can bring this back up if anybody needs this particular wording, but that's the general idea. I'll stop sharing and we can open it up to questions if anybody has any for Kyle, the property owner, or if we need questions from the architect, we can get Courtney Kaiser available.
I have quick questions. I have a guess, but who are Anna Anglin and Richard Laurie, who are also participating digitally? Corey.
Sure. We've been introduced to Anna maybe once before in the Planning Commission. Anna Anglin is our planning and zoning administrator. So Anna is staff within the planning department. And then Richard Laurie is also staff. He is our sustainability Vista, who we've brought over to the planning department. And so as we move to our discussion items, Anna and Richard are going to be presenting tonight as well.
Awesome.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing. Yeah, that's a good point to introduce him really quick. Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't know which commissioners know or have met, so I want to make sure. Good to have you all. Commissioners, any questions? I know that we have the applicant or the property owner in chambers right now. Corey is my understanding. So if you have any questions for Mr. Kaiser, he is there. Take it away, folks.
Do any of these units fall under the workforce housing resolution?
I can answer that question, as we have not officially approved that ordinance, which we'll be giving an update on later. Kyle's project was participating previously, but as the item lapsed, this project has been removed from a complying or necessary and complying project. So it is not participating in the active employment household ordinance.
Kyle, you want to wait like a week? You could get a lot more bang for your buck, I think.
You do want to speak? Come on up. We'll have right into where Jess is at.
Yeah, as a quick update for commissioners, Corey will say that, but that ordinance was moving through council. There's been some changes made to it. Was all ready to be approved on Tuesday. There's just a couple more tweaks that they need to make, but I think that's pending very soon. But would actually add quite a few things for developers of properties that it would apply to give some incentives to maybe make up for any potential losses with the AEH requirement for the percentage of households. Like height and parking are two things, which is cool. So,
So if we don't have to vote on this tonight, then you said it was possible action. Could we wait? No.
Yeah, the city council has asked similar questions. Where we're an administrative body in this case, if the project is compliant within our municipal code structure, any motion for table or motion for denial needs to have findings of fact tied in which, so you'll see kind of in those options, if you're to table it, you need to give specific reasons as to why to the applicant. Same thing for denial. So the short answer is I would not recommend a table or denial action unless you have specific findings within the code currently.
Yeah, and I think also because the project is already vested and is already so far along in the process, it couldn't retroactively apply anyway because the pending ordinance doctrine for this potential ordinance expired. That would have been the catch that would have made it apply to vested things or things that came into the pipeline while council was working on it. But because that lapsed, it will immediately apply when council finalizes it and votes on it to anything new that comes in, but it won't apply to these things that are already X amount of far along in the process. Correct me if I'm wrong, Corey.
That's correct. So a complete site plan application submittal to the planning department becomes a vesting document. So the 2x3 project was submitted as full site plan months ago. To that point, any delay in this is not changing the participation. It's based on when they entered into the review.
Yeah, I mean that, and I've had some discussions with Kyle way back when too, when the first iteration of the AEH ordinance was being proposed. If you'll remember, Mr. Kaiser submitted some comments, came into the public hearing for that. I'm curious just to sort of hear your updates, Kyle, if you have any on affordability components or anything that you've sort of baked into the design for the project about, maybe the condominiums are targeted towards a certain demographic and the townhomes, something else, anything like that. It might be nice to share that with commissioners if you want to give a little bit maybe background on the project.
Yeah, the speaker.
Jessica, you look so different now.
I'm not as glamorous as Jessica, so I apologize. Yeah, so I hope this is not a project, that instigates, I think there's been some problematic projects that have happened in town that have really put the AEH on the forefront of everyone's mind. And I hope by virtue of kind of the distribution of the units in this, that 13 of the units are the condo units, which are mostly 2-bedroom units. And by virtue of the size, they're going to be priced at a much more affordable level. This is a downtown lot. And so we did include the townhomes to serve the upper tier of the market, but we've also mixed it with these smaller condo units to achieve density in this case, but also, to make it more attainable for a lot of potential home buyers in Moab. So, that's kind of where we're at on the affordability aspects of it.
Is there anything, and this is all just speculative, obviously not to do with the ordinance, or excuse me, with the level 2 site plan approval, but to stop, I know the concern of both city staff and commission members and city council has been that units that might be appropriate for locals, more affordable, more attainable, are getting snatched up really quickly by outside buyers. Is there anything you're doing? Like, I know, for example, for the ones over on Cane Creek, there was a time period where things were open maybe only to a certain demographic of the market, and then it was opened up wider. Is there anything like that? Because you could see, unfortunately, even when they're more affordable, they're extra attractive maybe to people who would love a little slice of Moab to live in 2 months out of the year. Is there anything that you're thinking to sort of assuage that from happening with this project?
Yeah, so I think that's a great point. I remember with the Cane Creek condominiums, that was actually a hugely successful selling point for them. So I think there's, a desire from my end to, engage in something like that, especially for essential service workers in town and things like that, to make these available to them, to make sure that everyone gets a fair shot at these. We haven't gotten super far along in how we are going to market these at this point, but I think personally, I have a pretty high interest in that because I think ultimately these projects, they have to serve the interest of the community. And, it's a balancing act between the economics of it and, providing housing at all levels, but also giving people a fighting chance as far as, attainability.
Thank you. Any other questions for the applicant from other commissioners or our council liaison?
No, I don't really have a question, but I do have a comment, and I just hope that I just see some things go on the market and like they're sold before they ever hit the market. So I don't know how that all happens, whether it's through real estate agents. So I would hope that maybe you do have some kind of time frame where it's open to, and I'm not talking real estate agents that buy them up and snatch them and sell them to their people out of state. You know, I would love to see this go to local people. I have lost so many teacher applicants this year and still am not fully staffed because they cannot afford to live here or move here and be part of our community. And even some of my staff members who live here still are paying outrageous amounts of rent that could go for purchasing something. So I really hope that you're thinking this and you know, for our local people. And I just wanted to say that. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed that this is what happens with this, because it's a great location and I'd love to see it go in and really serve our local people who live here 12 months a year.
Yeah, for sure. And even, I mean, it seems like particularly the condos might be really great to have as places that, you know, if even several are owned by local businesses, to have as rotating staff housing that, you know, the upkeep is certainly less than going and buying like a really old single family house, which is certainly also happening. I know in my neighborhood, we have a couple houses that are owned by businesses. Some of them non-local who have maybe a franchise here or something like that, some of the hotels. But you know, there's such a market. I will echo Jill's concern with like letting that market like jump in first if possible, if that makes sense. And you certainly understand that, Kyle. I know you have other long-term rentals as well in town. So
yeah, and just to clarify some of those comments, it sounds like it's more about the attainability. And so like maintaining regular market values, it's just really giving a little bit of like a window for locals to try to get their foot in the door and all that, right? Yeah.
Yeah, like I have friends who are going to own their first home in those Cane Creek, in that Cane Creek development, because they were given like, you know, the week to think and process as a young first-time home buyer, and they decided to pull the trigger. And I think if it was like, you have 20 seconds to do this, it maybe would not have happened. And these are like people who work at the hospital, my friends who got places there. So super needed. Awesome. Any other comments or questions for the applicant or for Corey or planning staff, anything like that before we entertain a motion? All right. As always, you have several options. If you look at the agenda summary, you can conditionally approve the site plan application. You can continue or table the action to a later meeting if there's something that needs attention to city staff or the applicant. Or we can deny the site plan application, of course, giving specific findings for that denial, if that is what you choose. And there is a recommended motion along with a condition as well, which is about the need for a condominium and townhome plat, which we know has actually been submitted, but just to get that all in order, and an application including CC&Rs and HOA. Corey, real quick, just because it's been a while since we've had a condo application, can you give a quick rundown about the difference between townhome and condo and like twin home to other commissioners?
Sure, and that'd be having us dive into a greater conversation about divisions of property and property rights. But the really quick explanation is a condominium, if you think about it, is just paint to paint interior. It's something, it can be a unit of space that is stacked or somewhere within the property, both in the aspect is how I mean. A townhome is a similar type of ownership structure, except it includes the land underneath. The reason there's such a distinction between condominium and townhome, especially with lenders, is that land component. Townhomes, if you want to think about it that way, townhomes are often structured as row houses because it is from the sky to the ground, that is the ownership. From a condominium, it's just the interior of a unit of a structure. So like an apartment building can be turned into a condominium, but it cannot be turned into a townhome because there isn't that connection of land that is associated with it. A twin home is a individual parcel, and there is a difference between parcels, lots, and town site parcels. I'd love to get Luke Splake, county surveyor, over to explain all the varieties because it is, I think, challenging to keep some of these straight sometimes. But an individual parcel that is then split equally into two lots, and twin being the key phrase here, it is a mirrored structure that straddles a lot line of a larger parcel. So twin is two, condominium is kind of three-dimensional within a property, and then townhome has a land component. You can kind of think sky to ground. Hopefully that's, I know it's a little elementary the way I broke it down, but that is in essence what we're dealing with. And there are different strategy reasons within financing and lending why a property might go a certain way, one way or the other. One additional comment, as we go to make the motion, I know it's a large motion. In the past, we've done this. What would be a sufficient motion is to make the top motion. I move that the Moab Planning Commission with the included comments 1A and B. You don't have to read out the conditions, just that they are included in that verbal motion, and we can use the document. So you don't have to read out that whole sub condition.
Okay, great. So the recommended motion is in the agenda summary part of the packet, if anyone would like to make that.
I'll take it ahead. I move that the City of Moab Planning Commission conditionally approve the level 2 site plan for the 2x3 townhomes and condominium project on property located at 175 South, 300 East, Moab, Utah 84532, with the following conditions listed as comments 1A and 1B.
I think that's sufficient. Nice job. Okay, we have a proposed motion. Is there a second?
I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion that's on the table right now? Or final comments, final anything?
I guess a comment just about condominiums and townhomes is that you're going to find that condominiums are a lot cheaper just because you don't get that land aspect. So then that's how you fill in the space for lower income or, you know, more attainable. I guess lower income shouldn't be used.
There's plenty of good income that doesn't have housing in town. Okay, we will do a roll call vote on the motion if everyone's ready, which was made by Ruben and seconded by Jill for your notes, Corey.
Thank you.
And you're gonna ask. Okay, Ruben.
Aye.
Jesso.
Hi.
Jill.
Aye.
And I vote aye as well. Motion passes unanimously 4-1. Thank you, Mr. Kaiser, for being here, answering questions, and hearing our comments. We sincerely hope you take it to heart. Thank you. Okay. What do we have next? Lost my agenda page. Discussion items. Future land use code amendments and city initiatives, including possible landscaping code amendments, possible outdoor lighting code amendments, ooh, interesting, possible subdivision code amendments, possible planned unit developments code amendment, and review of identified code discrepancies list. Which sounds like we have some presentations by other city staff members other than Jessica and Corey too.
We do. I've been promising this discussion for a long time now, and we finally, to some degree, have our feet under us enough to get the ball rolling. So by no means are all of these well underway. Some of them are underway. Some are in the infancy stages, and some are just simply that discussion items. Oh, I thought I lost a commissioner. No, we're all still here. And with the help of staff, we're going to go through some of these breakdowns. And what I would like to do is, if we can, briefly touch on these from a staff perspective and then re-engage in a conversation. Because all of these have the potential of going down a rabbit hole. I think if we just went line by line, there's no way we would make it out of here. And I'm already planning for some extensive discussion here tonight. So we can make it as long or short as we want, but the hope is that the staff has been directed to identify many of these. Some of these are going to be original to what we've been seeing within our code and how we'd like to respond. So some of these have been directed by city council, and some of these are staff coming before planning commission to see if this is something that wants to be addressed by the planning commission, and then we'll take it to city council. So there is some kind of circular and roundabout need for discussion and need for direction, because staff on its own can't initiate any particular ordinance or code change amendment, but at the direction of commission and the direction of council, we do have that authority. So I do have, it's really not a presentation, but more of just a checklist to let us break things down. I think a quick update, and there are some items on here that weren't included in the agenda necessarily, just because these are ongoing and extended items, but an update on the active employment household ordinance. So at our city council meeting on Tuesday, we did present what is nearing a finished draft ordinance for the active employment household. There were, following the closed session, a few amendments that needed to be tweaked and changed, but at that scale, there wasn't anything substantially different. It was more minor components that needed amendment. So hopefully our commission has been following along to some degree. If you haven't, we can break into that a bit more once we get through our list. We can always come back. But to some great extent, we feel we've created what is the only outcome of this ordinance. It is so legally tight that there really isn't more flexibility in the council. I think is quite clear that if we were to do any more to this ordinance, it becomes neutered to an effect. It would not create any sort of outcome. So we're at this very critical point of, we've included as much benefit, as much flexibility as we possibly can without the legal structure breaking down, or without it becoming an ineffective ordinance. To say that the possibility for exemption or exclusion from it is so broad that we might as well not even put it in. So it's as broad as it can feasibly be. We are really proud of this ordinance. We believe that it will still be effective despite it taking some additional amendments that reduced both the quantity and then increasing the benefit bonuses. So we feel for a local developer, this is a really fair and reasonable ordinance, because it is such a low bar to accomplish. It is just the bare minimum to allow our community to survive. And I say that from kind of this director position that as we've drafted this, we have all identified that we were in a housing crisis. I think from Jill's comments, those comments that we've had from other people in the community, we don't use the term crisis lightly. Our essential services are leaking and degrading to a point where, as a community, we're starting to fail and function. And that's the city's responsibilities to, at the most lowest bar, plug the dam to ensure that remaining level of water stays in there. And that's what this ordinance is attempting to do. So that's kind of my impassioned speech about it, but we can talk about the details and how that works legally if you'd like to. But I would stay tuned with city council in the next coming meetings to really get the full synopsis, where we do have our land use attorneys to discuss some of those things further. But at this point, I think we all have a really good grasp on all the different components. Jumping over now, we have, with the planning commission and city council, engaged with Water Now to engage a landscaping code amendment. Within that, there's a memo that's been provided on the structure of which we would like to implement, and where we've basically taken that is depending on the scale of development, so whether it's a building permit, a site plan, or a higher level function like a subdivision or a townhome, something taking a development to the next tier, we're going to implement a scaled landscaping requirement, basically to reduce water usage is kind of the essence through landscaping. So to ensure that we don't have what is a regional standard in most places, and for the most part, developers doing this within their developments without it being regulated, but there are some that come in and develop as if they're in South, where turf grass is everywhere, and just our climate doesn't create good opportunity for that. So what we're looking at is water budgeting at the larger scale of items, and then on the lower scale, just ensuring that your irrigation zones are housed with appropriate plant material and living plant species, and that they're, and I know Richard's on here, might be able to help me out a little bit better, or I guess Jessica, you were sitting in on that. So I think for now, I might just hold off on the deeper level discussion, but that is something that the commission has been in discussion with and actually gave advice on where they wanted that to go. So what we're seeing is that ordinance is coming back to us now for drafting. We're going to be working on developing a framework for water now to infill some of their language. And then from there, we were going to start building that ordinance up to present to Planning Commission to kind of do the final polishing at that point. At this point, with outdoor lighting, I'm going to kick it over to Richard Laurie to do a short update presentation on those dark sky code amendments. Oh, we might have lost Richard. Oh, bummer. Okay, well, maybe we won't. We'll wait and see if Richard can come back.
He left and then he popped back in for maybe 5 seconds and then out again.
Wondering, yeah, it may be a internet connection issue, unfortunately. I'll keep the participation bar up. So moving on, subdivision code. The subdivision code and planned unit development code are in need of major attention process-wise. There are elements of these ordinances that are far outdated, and the structural process is really not contemporary with what the expectations legally are. So when we go to have a subdivision come in there, and we've seen this with a few recently, where there are preliminary plans, preliminary plats, final plans. With the Atlas and Abbey, I know, or excuse me, not Atlas, Portal Vista and Abbey, we had those, we kind of had to accentuate what it is we were doing at this point and what it is we're going to be doing next. And for developers, that makes it kind of cumbersome, especially within the code. It isn't exactly clear sometimes when a preliminary is needed, when a final is needed, when a certain approval allows another approval. So these are in need of dire update. And oh, okay, perfect. Okay, well, yeah, we'll jump back to him. Planned affordable development, our PAD ordinance, has been long noted as having some issues. More recently, we've been able to run numbers, and this is what we've been hoping to do, is get out of more of the philosophical range of, well, we think it doesn't work because this and this. Is like, let's figure out really what's going on. So with a local developer, we ran the numbers on a particular project that was attempting to go through the PAD originally, but because of financing, they didn't have time to go through that full structure. So they allowed a location on their property to be retroactively infilled with PAD. However, the market conditions that we're experiencing now have tipped, where the PAD was, it penciling, of course, being the term meaning you're able to make a profit. Oh, here's Richard. a profit on a particular project within a certain amount of years. It pencils. It makes sense for a developer to do that. If a project doesn't pencil, it means a developer is going to be losing money. And I think a lot of our public often confuse this point of, why doesn't the developer just do this? Well, if they're going to be losing money, I understand that a lot of developers, from the goodness of their heart, do want to promote beneficial housing for the community. Some are truly, I think, doing their job, which is to maximize profits, kind of that capitalistic realm. So penciling is when that inverts and they are no longer able to make profit. We've found that the planned affordable development, under the current conditions of the ordinance and under the current market conditions, that penciling threshold actually is flirting or all the way into an inaccessible realm. So we would like to, as staff, revisit that, because the Walnut Lane project wasn't approved, it was a funded project, but that was pre-COVID. So it was possible before. What we're seeing now is we want to make it possible again. In addition to that, there's some development standards that are obvious. We've discussed parking in the past as being one of those horizontal development envelopes that was too onerous, that it took too much space away from what could be living space. So readdressing the parking, which was actually required a higher parking count than what was the underlying zoning. And that's an obvious discrepancy of, I think, kind of last minute math that occurred, of thinking they were making a bonus. What they actually did was make a burden. And that's what we need to remedy there. Let's jump back to Richard, if we have you. I'll stop sharing screen. Sorry, internet was a bit dicey for you. Let's jump back to outdoor lighting and have us walk through that update.
Cool. All right. I will try to be concise and not take up too much time. Can you guys hear me? Can you guys see this?
We cannot. We can hear you, Richard, but I don't believe you shared screen correctly.
You disappeared.
Yeah, I'm very confused. Share screen. I'm doing this on.
Richard, if we need to, I think I actually have your presentation available, so I can pull that up if you want to just commentate, and I'll drive.
All right, 1 second, I might have figured it out. All right, can you see that?
You can,
Yeah,
thank you.
good.
All right, sorry about that. All right, so the intro to lighting code amendments. Doing this on a new screen. Can you guys see that I scroll down? I don't know if this tablet's working right.
Yeah,
Yes.
looks good.
All right, so the first point that we want to address is legal nonconformity. In Chapter 17 of General Provisions, we already have precedent in our code and our zoning code for legal nonconformity. In the original writing, there's the termination, immediate termination of non-compliant lighting, and we perceive issues with that. And so we want to go to legal nonconforming and be more in line with our current code. So any existing outdoor lighting which is otherwise lawful but does not comply, we deemed legal nonconforming. Will be brought into compliance as follows. I skipped a couple of points because they're remaining the same. But for the amortization period, at the end of the amortization period of 5 years, you'll be deemed legal nonconforming. So, and what legal nonconforming means is that if you want to put money into your property, you have to bring your fixtures into compliance. So with the amortization period of 5 years, at the end of the 5 years, you'll be legal nonconforming. And if you want to put money in your property, you have to bring it into compliance. But up until that 5 years, you can still put money in your property and not become conforming. In addition to legal nonconformity, we're supplementing that with a change to MMC special provisions. I'll get into that more in a second. And then number 5 probably doesn't need to be there. It's just reiterating something from 1712 about abandoned properties and change of use having to come into compliance.
Let's pause there for a second,
Yeah.
Richard, just to explain a little bit further. Some of that was a lot of planning jargon to some degree, especially kind of the essence of what legal nonconforming or grandfather is. I think what most of the public might recognize this as. But what has been understood is that at the end of that amortization period, what we had was 5 years for everyone in the city, every commercial property, every residential property to come into full compliance with our new lighting provisions, meaning every hotel, every residence was going to have to do a lighting audit of their own property and come to full compliance. If that were the case for those properties that didn't, so say a hotel, there could have been tens of thousands of dollars worth of improvements required at a single date. So meaning they would be in a violation and potentially going down that road of land use violation through our zoning code and enforcement. That is, we don't handle any other aspect of our code that way. And we're really not set up legally to police and attack properties in that perspective. So what this does, and like Richard was saying, is it very similar with the landscaping ordinance. There's a lot of concern about the city was making decisions that are going to incur cost on the existing property owners. To some degree, that could just be one fixture. That could be, $20. We even have a reprogram where the city or the Dark Skies group pays you to fix your fixtures. But for these larger companies or larger properties, especially in the commercial realm, we would have been facing some serious negotiation, litigation conversations of how to get them into compliance. So what this does is it brings us to the next topic, which Richard was going to get to, is what if there's a nuisance? So again, all of these things we can go deep into the weeds for, but if your property is legal nonconforming, which most properties in Moab are because they're often very funky, whether it's the lot or the structure themselves, we have standardized paths to come into compliance or allow you to continue an existing use without needing to incur immediate cost onto the individual. So this is what we're trying to mitigate. Richard, sorry, I just want to explain a little bit further on that, but let's, we can jump into the nuisance and special provisions code now.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Richard,
I've been kind of breathing lighting ordinances for a while, so.
Ruben's got a quick question. And so commission members, if you have a question, just speak up, because I don't think Richard can see all of you.
I can't see anything at all. I just see my screen.
I was just wondering if is 5 years not sufficient enough time to get people into compliance? I feel like that's one of those things where if a business has a problem with it, or a resident, that within those 5 years they can say something like, oh, they won't be able to comply. Like after 5 years, you can kind of force it.
Well, and that is, go ahead, Richard.
Oh, I didn't say anything. I think you should cover that.
Okay. Yeah, what I would say that is kind of an idealistic way of which zoning works, is that we could put in amortization, meaning we've made a decision and everybody agrees with it, and therefore we've given them the appropriate amount of time to convert. But what the simple practicality of it is that these hotels are not putting money towards updating their fixtures. Most of these properties are not doing that either. When we're getting into magnitudes, I think on a simple, smaller property, it really isn't that big of a deal. But on some of these properties, it could be tens of thousands of dollars of improvements or elements of taking away lighting that had cost them money. So it's maybe not new cost, but they're cutting the wires to what had cost them $20,000. And we had only just approved this 5 years ago. So there's plans that span a much longer time frame. So what we're trying to do is be practical and thoughtful. I think idealistic is a great approach. I think when we enter into the sustainability realm, there's a balancing act of promoting idealistic ordinances. But what we need to do is be practical, that we're picking our battles and picking them
Okay.
appropriately. And that's what this is, I think, is trying to be as fair as possible, saying, this is how we handle every other adjustment within our code, is that you have the grace or protection of a legal non-conforming status. But if you're willing to put money into improving your property, well, you're gonna have to put it towards coming into compliance with your dark sky, as well as if you want to do additions or anything else. So it's
Consistently grandfathered, yeah.
Correct.
Okay. I'll take that, yeah. Thank you. It was a good clarification.
And then on top of that, we'll be supplementing it with the special provisions code. We'll be updating the special provisions, because you can see with legal nonconforming, you could perceive like somebody has a spotlight that is shining into somebody's yard, but was lawfully existing before, so now it's legal nonconforming. So we need some way to bring those really bad cases into compliance. And that's what the special provisions would be for. Currently, right now, for C1 through C4 in special provisions, there's a statement of no dust, odor, smoke, vibration, or intermittent glare or noise shall be emitted, which is discernible beyond the premises. We would add in direct illumination. We'll get into that in a bit. But so we would want to be expanding this special provisions code throughout C1 through C4 as it is, the residential code, and wherever else it's needed. And then with the abatement of a nuisance, so let's say that person with the spotlight shining into another house, we first want to take the first like non-costly means of abating the nuisance, such as just redirecting it downwards, facing it downwards, and only requiring purchases if the nuisance can't be abated. But yeah, so special provisions and legal non-conforming will be how people come into compliance. So any questions on that before we move on? Okay. All right,
Yeah,
next
thank you.
up, we are removing some wording. And I'll get into why in a bit, but the light source must not be visible from any point outside the property boundary on which the fixture is located. We perceive this to be almost impossible to like actually enforce, but not only that, but it's almost physically impossible. And I'll go into why first with a couple of diagrams. So a reminder of what a fully shielded fixture is. It is a fixture that does not emit light above the horizontal of fixture above 90 degrees. So this would be a compliant fixture. And when you're facing it at eye level or above, you're not going to see the light source. But if you're anywhere below that light fixture, you will be able to see the light source. A little quick diagram that I came up with to illustrate this. Let's pay attention to the left side at first. We have a fully shielded fixture. Let's say it complies in every way. It has the correct lumens, has the correct temperature. It is, as you can see, it is directing light downwards. But because it is on a second-story balcony, that light source will be visible from beyond the property boundaries. And so the route that we want to go is this idea of directed illumination. And that would mean, again, all of this is rough wording, but it means the intentional illumination emanating from a fixture represented by the maximum intensity cone of light. And that's replacing the original wording of direct illumination, which is light emitted directly from a bulb. Now that light emitted directly from a bulb causes the problems with this light source must not be visible from any point outside the property boundaries. Because as we have gone over with these couple of diagrams, it's almost impossible to fully shield that light source from anywhere below the fixture.
Yeah, that's a really silly phrase. I definitely didn't notice that when we passed this originally, or I would have called that out then, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's in a few spots.
Jump in really quick. We've been in discussions with IDA, and I think as this ordinance, as well as other people's ordinances have been in place, our understanding of lighting has really evolved because it's been in a practical aspect. So in all the diagrams that we've previously reviewed, if we're looking at this section that Richard has right now, that directed cone that we're seeing, that's what every fixture they thought that a client fixture would be doing. But in real life, that is not the case. So when you're actually any fixture as you walk around town, like Richard said, fully compliant in every way, but if it is above 5'5" on that structure, you can see it basically from an infinite distance across boundary. So meaning if we were to follow our previous provisions to the T, there could be no light fixture above 5'5" on a building, because that is the optimal, thereabouts, of whether you're short or tall. It's a subjective perception of light. So what Richard's developed with this new language identifies what I think the original intention was, which is the directed cone of illumination. The intensity will be directed on site, but if there is non-directed illumination, which is what Richard was getting to, that would not be a violation of the code.
Yes.
So we don't need domes over everything.
Say that
In
again,
that
Richard.
case. Excuse me.
Could you repeat that?
I said, so we don't need domes over everything, all over the buildings, so that it's not coming out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
All right, so the directed illumination in this diagram would be the yellow high intensity cone of light, which is, get into this later, but is controlled by the fixture itself and how it's aimed. And then those dotted lines would be what we're going with of non-directed illumination, which is kind of the inverse, just anything that's not contained in the intentional direct illumination. So with the new wording that this would work itself into is something like this. Again, it's rough, but all light fixtures shall be aimed and shielded so that the directed illumination shall be confined to the property boundaries of the source. Non-directed illumination is allowed across property lines if the fixture is fully shielded and angled straight down. And then zoning administrator will determine compliance and all that. But so we want to allow the left side. It's going to have a little bit of light trespass, but because it's not in that high intensity cone, because the intentional light is directed for the purpose of lighting this patio, then that non-direct light, which as you'll know would also not be going into the sky. So it is fulfilling that fully shielded IDA requirement of not emitting light into the sky. Now, if you look at the right side, this is an example of someone who will be aiming a spotlight at, say, like 45 degrees. And some of that direct illumination in the high intensity cone will be going over a property boundary, and we don't want that. So that would not be compliant. And in addition, that non-directed illumination will also be going into the sky, which we want to avoid. So that's the purpose of directed illumination, to kind of hone in on what we really want to take care of. All right, so any questions on that? All right, so the next one up is total light output. We want to make it so that required safety lighting is not counted towards the total light output of the property. And again, total light output is basically the sum of all the lumens on the outdoor fixtures. What we've noticed in a few plans is that people are spending all of their total light output allowance on lighting that we require for safety, such as next to doors, next to walkways, etc. So going with kind of this candy and carrot route that we like to talk about, the required safety lighting would be your carrots, your vegetables. You're allowed to have those. We're not going to cut into your candy allowance with your with your carrot. But so that's what the change to total light output. In addition, we might want to rework the numbers. Currently, it's like 50,000 per acre for a commercial lot, 10,000 per acre for a residential lot. We might make those numbers the candy, the carrot, the cookies. So yeah, so removing required safety lighting from total light output.
So Richard, let me expand a little bit because that was a lot of C's. There was a lot of alliteration going on there. What Richard
Sorry.
is
Yeah.
saying is that that you explained it perfectly. It's just I might break it down just a little bit more. Is that when a development comes in through the building code and engineering requirements, they are required to put in a certain amount of safety lighting. Like Richard had said, it's walkways, portal entries, so like a door, circulation paths, parking, basically elements of the exterior in which a citizen or person on the property is going to need a sufficient amount of foot candle illumination. Now, what we were finding is with these not completely arbitrary, but some degree, just these numbers, they said, this is how many lumens you get per acre, that we couldn't even meet the safety standards, let alone some of what might be the amenity lights, like sconces and additional lighting that would be what we might think of nice on a particular development. So there was clearly an imbalance. And so what we've developed, and like Richard was saying, is this vegetables versus candy situation. So if you're putting vegetables onto your property, things you need, we're not going to be regulating that at a TLO. You're allowed to put in as much as the building code and everybody else is telling you you have to. But the candy or the carrots and cookies, you think about it, vegetables and something sweet, whatever you like to call it, the things that are cookies, that is what we're going to regulate, because that's an amenity bonus. It is not required for safety, but yes, maybe it is a life quality improvement for your property. But to a certain degree, we don't want that to be run away. So we are going to regulate that. So there's light outputs on either side of those. There's a light output for what's required and a light output for some things that are not required. The combination of both of those creates a total light output, the larger umbrella. And so what we're trying to navigate is where to set that TLO, or where we should set the light output or LO for the bonus lighting or the cookies. So that's, I hope that helped. Maybe I didn't explain it any better than Richard, but Richard, I thought you did quite well. Just wanted to break it down a little bit slower.
All right, any questions or thoughts on that?
No, I think that was really helpful from both of you. Apologies for having my camera off. I'm eating a snack and no one wants to watch. But I'm here. I have to say, having worked on the original ordinance way back when, it's a bummer that the amortization period is being turned into legal non-conforming use. I think I would love to see it maybe be extended and with some more proactive outreach to businesses, because it's also unfortunate that we're many, many years into it now. And now it's like, oh, we can't possibly comply. It's like, well, yeah, if you're trying to do it all in the last year, of course. I think it takes away a lot of the effect of the intent of the ordinance, because a lot of the really, really prevalent, sky illuminating places in town are big businesses. They're hotels that literally have upward facing lights that just shoot off to Jesus as a feature of their lightscaping on the buildings. And I know there were a lot of the community was really looking forward to those. I mean, frankly, sometimes nuisances, and I'm glad that we're tightening and expanding what is a nuisance under this code. I think that's really, really important. And I'm glad to see that happening. But it's a bummer that there's not that time promise of when they'll be, honestly, just more respectful to the community with light sources on businesses in our little small town, where I know people don't live here and people don't come here to have heavily illuminated cliff sides and stuff, unless they're doing Canyonlands by night. But so I don't know if there's another way to maybe extend the amortization period. It sounds like there's definitely legal concerns, which I certainly understand too. But I do think this is something we're we'll never be a community of this because like I think the history of Moab is like how long can you let this building that's been here for the last 60 years like still be the exact same building? I don't know what the incentive is, particularly when like overnight accommodations have made so much money in the last couple years in particular. It's unfortunate that that isn't getting put into, you know, complying with these code things. And we really didn't have pushback or comment from these businesses or individuals to the same degree as it seems like it's like an issue now. So yeah, and I will say the reimbursement program is great. I just helped my mom do that. At her house, she replaced 3 light fixtures on the outside of her house, and the Dark Skies Coalition is reimbursing the entirety of those fixtures and the install, which is very cool if you're under a certain amount. And I don't think people realize that, but it was super easy to do and really great. And I definitely think maybe it was just staffing changes in the pandemic and everything, but the outreach about that being available could be more too.
Yeah. On that note, I think that was the tough part is the Moab Dark Skies group dissolved. It was absorbed by the county's Dark Sky Task Force, who the city has participated on, but it has shifted priorities for sure. But to Kai's point,
is the county also changing their language?
They are looking, yes, they are looking to amend their language. They're kind of looking to us and how we're moving forward with that. And we're wanting to be collaborative, but I think at this point we want to drive the item forward. I think it was being lost in conversation and kind of lost in elements of complaint, saying this ordinance doesn't work and this property is wrong this way, but there wasn't a lot of solution momentum happening because there were so many elements of non-conformity coming in. We never got to the next step. And that was where the city, we just kind of wanted to, all right, we're going to start creating solution language. So we're still working with the county on that. And we're hoping to have mirrored ordinances would be the idea. So that is consistent throughout the valley. To your point, Kaya, though, this is draft language. This is a staff recommendation. So we could certainly maintain the current amortization period within this new amendment. I think there are clear discrepancies that need fixed. But what this edit is about is we've dealt with this ordinance now for almost 3 years. And the reality of what this ordinance, I think ideally was pursuing versus in practicality was putting us in a position of, we need to reconcile these because it's not being it wasn't successfully drafted because how would we have known? It was a pretty, I think, involved ordinance drafting period for Moab based off of a established template. But to know what was exactly going to work here was kind of the issue. So to your point, as far as properties, yeah, I'd like to see folks come into compliance, but we would have to, I think, evaluate what the outcome of those individual clashes would be as far as the enforcement of that. And that was something that was placed within this ordinance as the enforcement without any of the supporting framework within the city to accomplish that. So we don't have a policing force within the code enforcement to approach that or approach it from this magnitude. It's certain, and again, like I said, every topic we can get way into the weeds because these are super dynamic, super complex. But these are things that this planning commission needs to start wrapping their head around because we need to start making big moves pretty soon. So with the non-compliance component, it's something that we feel works, and it could work in moving the needle forward. I think it just depends on what the commission will want to see, and then along, more importantly, to what the council is willing to hold to. And it may be that they don't take staff recommendation on this. But we'll have work sessions on all of these things where we have the whole time to discuss. But there was another comment that you had made I wanted to address, but it is gone. I can't remember which point it was.
One thing she said was, can we extend it? And the IDA does allow for a max of 10 years for the amortization period, so we could extend it another 5 years.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
just,
I remember.
it sounds like we'll have a work session and there's more to be said. It just seems like getting rid of any sort of like compliance period is honestly giving up on the ordinance in large form. At least I know Moab well enough to know that that's going to be the effect. So, you know, anything that we can do to further incentivize, to further, you know, encourage, maybe wrapped into that compliance period would be super great. And maybe, yeah, I certainly understand the concerns of business owners about it can be very expensive to redo lighting, but you know, also it's tough being on Main Street sometimes, like at 4 a.m. when the sky is just like bright as can be, depending on where you are and what businesses are around. So I want to just make sure we're cognizant of it and not just being like, oh, maybe someday they'll renovate and come into compliance.
And that's with that extension period, that's something absolutely we've looked into as well as the 10-year. What that's doing is really kicking the can down the road, which is fine. But right now we're already having problems with enforcement because we're in this limbo. So I'm nervous we'd actually have less enforcement by extending that 10-year. In addition to that, something I want to note, but and I don't want to become too political in this component, but in our research, Flagstaff, of course, being the flagship of IDA, this is the mecca of how this ordinance should work. And I'm not sure when the last time most of you have been down there. Richard being from that area, he actually did an audit for us. And they've been dark sky for a number of years now. And kind of the sad, unfortunate truth is that municipalities are passing this ordinance, becoming certified, and then never following through. So as you drive through Flagstaff, yes, some new development construction is dark sky, similar to what we're seeing here. But within that city, the immediate termination clause doesn't exist. So maybe it's in their code, but in practicality, they are not following through with enforcing on that. And that's where something that Richard and I have talked about is performative code. It looks really good in writing. It looks good that we're doing these big things. But from a staff member, what that does to me is it makes me have to make an interpretation of something that I can get brought into a legal situation now because, well, according to the code, I have to do this here, but it's not being done anywhere else. And how do we work on that? And so Barry Ellison with the building official and I already have been put in really hard spots of having to deal with this code that doesn't work. And so we want a code that works. That's the priority. If we something in code, it better work. And that's what we've tried to research. How does this work in other communities? How did they do the immediate termination? And unfortunately, the flat truth is there's not a community that has successfully completed an immediate termination. And we've talked to IDA about this, and they're comfortable with the concept of us moving forward. That if a property then becomes legal non-conforming, that then shows up on their title. So if they're going to sell that property, there's now a flag on their property. So there's major incentive to come to compliance that way. So I don't want to say that we're giving up on compliance, but we're having to approach it from the legal backing that we already have.
Yeah, I understand, certainly. And you know me, I hate performative code too.
It's tough. We want to push that needle, but we got to learn where that threshold is. And I think that's what this 3 years has been about. So I'm actually open to looking further into it, but we want to report what we found so far. And this is what our findings are showing.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that explanation. That makes good sense.
Sorry, Richard, that was a huge tangent. Very important. I'm super glad we were able to cover those.
Yeah, no worries. All right, so total light output, I think there's probably no issues with that. All right, next up is lighting hours. We want to make sure that non-compliant lighting has a curfew. So we want to include non-compliant lighting on residential properties into the current lighting hours of 10 p.m. unless it's included in the full exemptions that we are creating. In addition, the next one is somewhat of an IDA requirement, is commercial establishments shall turn off illuminated signage by 10 p.m. or 1 hour after business close. The IDA requires that we regulate when just when signs can be on, basically. So 10 p.m. or business close.
They previously had language in about sunset, but clearly there's issues with that. So they're actually amending their checklist currently. So what Richard's showing here would be compliant within this new checklist.
Yeah, so going on to the next page, it goes over what the IDA checklist requirements are. The middle one is what we just discussed, is some kind of curfew. This says hour after sunset or before sunrise, and that seasonality just doesn't work. So we confirmed with IDA that we can just have a set 10 p.m. Curfew for signage. All right, the next one is, we'll go over the third one first. The IDA requires 200 square feet max for signs, but our sign code already is under that, so we're good there. The first one is a little tough. It's a little confusing, but IDA wants us to regulate how bright our signs are. We currently have a lumen max for signs, but lumens can be tough. If you imagine a black sign and a white sign, if they both have a 1000 lumen bulb, the black sign will be dimmer than the white sign. And so what we're struggling with is, so that's a problem. And then, so one way to make sure that they're in even brightness is through nits. Nits is a level, nits is what you see reflected off of an object. So, if you have 1000 lumens in a black and white sign, they'll have differing nits. So we could either go the route of having a max lumen count and having differing brightnesses, or we could go the nits route and set a max on what those signs actually look like. But in determining what the nits are, that would be very hard to do without, a doctorate in physics, lighting engineering. The nits in the planning phase will be really hard to get. Nits, when it's actually installed, would be easy because you just go up to the sign once it's installed and use a light meter to get the luminance levels. But that just doing that in the planning phase seems pretty hard to do. So this is definitely one that we welcome any input on, whether it's luminance, whether it's a lumen max or a nit max, we would like any input.
And again, to kind of simplify here is the IDA, the reason that we have a new checklist is every year they're making it more and more difficult. So Flagstaff, their checklist, because they were early on, had far less conditions than what we're seeing now, which is good. They're trying to move the general needle forward. But what they've begun to do now is look into a very specific lens where they're actual micro focusing. So this specific condition is performable in a lab or in a vacuous type of testing situation, but to put a sign on Main Street and then only measure that particular sign is not really feasible. So what we're trying to get at is when we talk to IDA is, can we deviate from this and how can we do it? So they need us to regulate signs. We just don't quite know how to do it effectively. And I think let's push this is very complex. Let's push this to another discussion. I think we're getting a little late on time and I want to leave time for Anna to jump in with some of her presentation.
I apologize. That's why I was kind of rushing through. So I do apologize.
Yeah, sorry, Richard. And I've probably taken more time than you have. Jess, would you do me a favor? Would you run actually, I just might have you run the meeting for a moment. My computer might die and then we'll lose recording, which might be a problem for us. So I might put you onto a next item to just discuss while I run up and get it. So
I'll run it down real quick.
Oh, Anna, that'd be great. Thank you.
You just, your plug-in, right?
If you get that brown leather satchel that's in that office, it should have a charging cable in there. It's yes, it's a Surface one. Yeah. Okay. If that's the case, thank you very much, Anna. Let's jump past. So one of the items, and I'm not going to pull up screen, I'm just going to reference it off my home screen now, was the idea of a long-term RV park. Now, the county has begun discussions on the potential of long-term temporary housing situations in the county in a different format. This is something that the city had approached with the strategic plan with the council, I think some 2 years ago, and the council was at that time half, I'd say, open to the idea of pursuing this. Now, this is something that our city engineers and building official and fire inspector are not terribly thrilled about, and somewhat have consistent opposition to. But what we're hearing is, that was fast. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Is a call to action within this crisis. I think when we're talking about our housing stock, I really don't want to use the term crisis lightly. So if that is truly the situation we're in, we need to look at every arrow in the quiver, this, of course, being one of them. Thank you, Jess. Now, this could be a temporary ordinance situation, placing a sunset clause on it at every seasonal year, meaning for 2023, we're going to allow long-term RV rental. So within the city, we don't have a great amount of mobile home parks or vacant land that this might be taken advantage of. But what we do have is a number of commercial properties that were suited for overnight accommodations, which currently are not moving forward with development. So these large properties are sitting mostly vacant or underutilized to a great degree. These property owners have come forward and saying, I'm willing to do this, or at least put in the amount of infrastructure required to service for their employees or in Moab, because what we're seeing is the seasonality of some of our employees. There's no way they can meet the rental rates. So what they're doing is living in vans illegally in the city, or living in vans and RVs or mobile homes or campers along the river road or out in the county or in BLM. And this is creating unsafe working conditions for people we should be taking care of as a community. Well, the problem with this is RVs are not built to a standard in which we're really able to ensure the safety. So an RV or a mobile home or a camper are specifically designed with a sticker that they should not be occupied for more than a certain amount of time. They're temporary occupancy units. Of course, we know that's not how they're used throughout the nation. But I've equated this conversation to a parent with a teenager and drinking. We know it's going to happen, but do we do it under our own watch to ensure it's done safely, or do we kind of turn our eye and not acknowledge it and not permit it? So in allowing this within the city, within a regulated fashion, we can provide bathing services, clean out facilities, clean water, and power to these temporary situations. So it is definitely a double-edged sword. And like I said, many of the staff members are opposed to this, but this is a planning concept we might as a body want to look at. I think Anna's back up at her desk now, so I will turn it over to Anna to discuss our updates or the generation of what might be a planned development process. Anna, are you available?
Yes, I'm right here. Did we already go over the state code updates and all that? I know that was part of one of your PowerPoint.
Yeah, we haven't. Why don't you talk about that as well?
Okay, yeah, I'll go ahead and just start on all of that real quick. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, first point of business is the Moab Municipal Code updates. We need to go through a lot of our code and get some changes made so that they reflect what the new state code changes have been. Last year, they went through a ton of different changes, and so our city code is really out of date because of that, and we need to catch up pretty quick. That has to do, that's throughout the zoning code, and then also some subdivision code as well. The next thing that I'm going to touch on is our Moab, our plan developments. So the plan development is supposed to allow flexibility with new developments that can have a better outcome than by zoning ordinance alone. In addition, plan development provisions are set by local law and not by state law. The things that are going on with our ordinance that makes it hard to implement the plan development is that they are restricted to only like residential zoning districts, and then there's a small use of allowed uses for plan development. So what we want to do is allow plan developments in all zoning districts and remove the list of allowed uses in the plan development. And then also, so that will also allow plan development ordinance to be usable in all areas of Moab jurisdiction. One of the big key issues too with this is that what we want to is make sure that any new larger development or any new development meets our general plan requirements. We can do that is implement in the new plan development ordinance, ties into the community vision that's in our general plan, and then demonstrate how element meets the goals of the city. And then we also want to demonstrate the development will meet the future land use need as well. And then in order to help with development guidance, the city does need to develop area plans. That is also listed in the general plans, but that's something that does need to come up for, for future development. I would say pretty quickly, but any questions?
To maybe pitch in here just a little bit and frame, some commissioners might be familiar with what we had called, well, obviously the plan unit development, PUD, or our master plan, MPD processes. Currently in the city, we have a number of projects because of the larger scale that they're getting involved in. They're having to submit multiple series of applications and different processes to accomplish what goal they have. So they're submitting a plat amendment, rezone, site plan, townhome, and other applications all at once. So we have multiple processes going on for the same project, which can kind of conflict and become really complicated. We're experiencing that with the Sitla USU project right now because of how massive that scope is. What this PD would do is allow us to process these all under one umbrella of development code that's consistent with underlying zoning parameters, but of course in line, like Anna is saying, with our vision and general plan provisions that we need to do. So it's something that it's almost more of a processing element than it is an overlay or some additional tool for the community. This is a tool, I think, really for staff and developers to most effectively create the developments without handcuffing itself left and right, because we just don't have that sophisticated code.
Yeah, and that's another thing is that there are some developments that are going through that we don't really have the process that we should have to make it tied together a little better, like what he was saying, what Corey was saying. So,
and to Anna's point too, with the state code updates, we have had since 2019 a running list of code discrepancies, just because of how old our code is, how antiquated some sections are. when updates are brought in, they're updating one section or maybe one and a few sections. And we've experienced this with our sign ordinance. If you remember, there was sign code all over the place, and we need to reconsolidate that. So even within that, this running list, and that was something I was going to present tonight, but it actually might make more sense to bring up this notion that the city council has now budgeted and permitted to consult out and have a code rewrite, which we've been in dire need of, and something Nora Shepherd, the previous director, was really pushing to accomplish. And that is finally in the cards, where we've had the ability to line that out. So in the next year, we will be setting up the bid process to have our code rewritten, recollated, reconsolidated, and cleaned up, which will make it infinitely easier for the public and for staff to process and move developments efficiently through, but also effectively with how we'd like to. So we're not dealing with 2 sets of setbacks or 3 sets of building heights. We're going to have everything consistent, which we need desperately. Anna, was there any other updates from your end? I think.
I really think right now it's just an introduction, just to get people open to an idea of having these kinds of changes. There hasn't really been anything started on as far as this goes. It's just more, this is kind of what we'd like to see happen and achieve. And then the plan development, updating the plan development ordinance would help give us a tool, make that more doable, I guess you might want to say.
Sure. Go ahead and we'll enter back to gallery mode. What I was really hoping to keep this down to was an hour for this presentation. So that's leaving us 10 more minutes, but I do want to kick it back to the Plan Commission members. And I can bring up this checklist again to help remind you what we're looking at if you need it. But to touch on some of these items, we did not give you a good opportunity to really ask too many questions or dive into it, because like I said, we could spend easily a couple hours in each of these. But this is the next push that we're getting into, is bringing our community code up to speed with where we need it. I think the community, developers, and staff are getting really tired of having to deal with things that should be fixed. And I think that's this next step, is fixing what we need done. But wanted to get out for any comments, any questions, or suggestions within this list, anything else that you've realized or components that we've talked about.
I think it's awesome. Thank you for the presentation. Obviously, the pad and the temporary housing solutions are huge priorities, I think, for me and a lot of other commissioners in particular. So, available land is going to go. It's not always going to be there. So anything that we can do with an eye toward making sure that future development on open parcels, the few that remain in the city, are things that we want to see that are, done in the way that we think is needed. That's a huge priority, I think. And I know your office certainly agrees. So preaching to the choir.
How does the city make an effort to dictating what like an open parcel is and what it can be? I mean, aside from the zone that it's in currently, I mean, how do you decide what commercial, like what commercial use it is?
That is a great question, and kind of a kind of philosophical component is our job really to direct individual property rights. Our job is to protect individual properties and their ability. So outside of zoning, there isn't. So we are in desperate need of childcare, daycares. If you're zoned for daycare, school, but you're also zoned for t-shirt shop and ATV, there's nothing we can do to encourage, outside of incentives potentially. But what incentives do we really have in that capacity is pretty minimal, because obviously we're not assessing a property tax. So therefore there's no incentive there. The list gets really thin when it comes to commercial, but that's where we need to go next. I think housing is a huge priority, but our community needs to develop out commercial of elements that we need truly. It's not just the low hanging fruit. tourism, not to knock on any of our tourism-based commercial in the community. We need those too. But we need balance, just like housing. We need the second homes, but we also need employee housing. We need the ATV rentals, but we also need childcare. It's a balance, and we need folks in the community to acknowledge that, recognize that, and maybe try to seize an opportunity saying, well, if I'm the only dry cleaner in town, well, I'll get a lot of business probably. And that's what we need people to recognize and kind of maybe start thinking outside the box. But no is the short answer. There's nothing really we can do.
But yeah, Ruben, I mean, leaving, if there's code changes that can be made that instead of being cross zone code changes can be put as incentives for particular kinds of uses. I think that's the biggest tool that we have, honestly. Like having in the, as of now, revised AEH ordinance, having some parking and height bonuses that come with that. We're not just changing that like citywide or zone wide at this point. So now it is an incentive rather than just being something that's a use by right in the zone, which is nice. So
just like the example of just cutting down parking because, a certain commercial use doesn't require that, and we can push to that fact.
Yep. Particularly, like you said, when it makes good sense, when it's sort of a no-brainer, like it shouldn't have the same kind of standard, just logically. That's definitely easy. I think it's easy to get the community to come along with that too, for sure.
Then a push and okay, well, there's another opportunity to fill in that space. Yeah, because I run into that issue whenever I sit and try to write, and in Anna's point, there was something, small area plans, and I wrote down, well, we have commercial districts and housing, community space, and public walkways, but how do you actually say, well, this is what that is, besides just putting money towards making it look prettier? Because it feels as much as we can do, but incentives and parking and height.
Yeah, I'm excited to continue this discussion. Thank you, Corey and Anna and Richard.
Yeah, thank all of you for that. There was it's been a second since we've had a planning commission meeting, so kind of putting all of this into this one is a really nice one.
And that's
it. I am one of those people. We have a softball game tonight. I'm trying to get to play in. So
we'll leave it at that. This was overwhelming, but I'm glad to have gotten it before you. We can get those gears turning is my hope. And then when we do come before you, we'll try to space them out. We're going to focus on landscaping this next meeting, or focus on outdoor lighting. You'll be prepped. We'll be kind of ready to dive in deep with those items.
Yeah, I like that. And I especially in the emails, just having a list of everything in the agenda item that we're going to talk about was nice to see for the last week. So, but that's typical, but yeah, no, thank you.
Is that all from you guys, Corey?
It is. The future agendas, site plans coming up, but we'll go ahead and allow the commission to adjourn when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for attending here in town and remote. Really nice to have that option. Thanks, Corey, for arranging that at the last minute with the commission concerns. And thank you to members of the public for attending. If you're still hanging out. Yes. All right. I adjourn this meeting at 7:56 p.m. Thank you, everyone. See you in a couple weeks.
Thank you. Bye.